guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I have for you the Screwtape letters by C.S. Lewis. I'm going to be reading letter 4, 5, and 6, and I will be announcing it right here. So let's get started. Okay, my dear Wormwood, the amateurish suggestion in your last letter warned me that it is high time for me to write to you fully on the painful subject of prayer. You might have spared the comment that my advice about his prayer for his mother proved singularly unfortunate. That is not the sort of thing that a nephew should write to his uncle, nor a junior tempter to the undersecretary of the department. It also reveals an unpleasant desire to shift responsibility. You must learn to pay for your own blunders. The best thing, where it is possible, it is to keep the patient from the serious intention of praying altogether. When the patient is an adult recently reconverted to the enemy's party, like your man, this is best done by encouraging him to remember, or to think he remembers, the parrot-like nature of his prayers in childhood. In reaction against that, he may be persuaded to aim at something entirely spontaneous, inward, informal, and unregularized. And what this will actually mean to a beginner will be an effort to produce himself a vaguely devotional mode in which real concentration of will and intelligence have no part. One of their poets, Coleridge, has recorded that he did not pray with moving lips and bended knees, but merely compose his spirit to love and indulge a sense of supplication. That is exactly the sort of prayer we want, and since it bears a superficial resemblance to the prayer of silence, as practiced by those who are very far advanced in the enemy's service, clever and lazy patients can be taken in by it for quite a long time. At the very least, they can be persuaded that the bodily position makes no difference to their prayers, for they constantly forget. What you must always remember, that they are animals, and that whatever their bodies do affects their souls. It is funny how mortals always picture us as putting things into their minds. In reality, our best work is done by keeping things out. If this fails, you must fall back on a subtler misdirection of his intention. Whenever they are attending to the enemy himself, we are defeated. But there are ways of preventing them from doing so. The simplest is to turn their gaze away from him towards themselves. Keep them watching their own minds and trying to produce feelings there by the action of their own wills. When they meant to ask him for charity, let them instead start trying to manufacture charitable feelings for themselves, and not notice that this is what they are doing. When they meant to pray for courage, let them really be trying to feel brave. When they say they are praying for forgiveness, let them be trying to feel forgiven. Teach them to estimate the value of each prayer by their success in producing the desired feeling, and never let them suspect how much success or failure of that kind depends on whether they are well or ill, fresh or tired at the moment. But of course, the enemy will not meantime be idle. Whenever there is prayer, there is danger of his own immediate action. He is cynically indifferent to the dignity of his position and ours as pure spirits, and to human animals on their knees he pours out self-knowledge in quite shameless fashion. But even if he defeats your first attempt at misdirection, we have a subtler weapon. The humans do not start from the direct perception of him, which we unhappily cannot avoid. They have never known the ghastly luminosity, that stabbing and searing glare which makes the background of permanent pain to our lives. If you look into your patient's mind when he is praying, you will not find that. If you examine the object to which he is attending, you will find that it is a composite object containing many quite ridiculous ingredients. There will be images derived from pictures of enemy as he appeared during the discreditable episode known as the Incarnation. There will be vaguer, perhaps quite savage and purely images associated with the other two persons. There will even be some of his own reverence and a bodily sensation accompanying it, objectified and attributed to the object revered. I have known cases where what the patient called his God was actually located up and to the left at the corner of the bedroom ceiling, or inside his own head, or in a crucifix on the wall. But whatever the nature of the composite object, you must keep on praying to it, to the thing that he has made, not to the person who has made him. You may even encourage him to attach great importance to the correction and improvement of his composite object, and to keep it steadily before his imagination during the whole prayer. For if he never comes to make the distinction, if he consciously directs his prayers not to what I think thou art, but to what thou knowest thyself to be, our situation is, for the moment, desperate. Once all his thoughts and images have been flung aside, or if retained with a full recognition of their merely subjective nature, and the man trusts himself to the complete real, external, invisible presence, there with him in the room and never knowable by him as he is known by it. Why then it is that the incalculable may occur in avoiding this situation, this real nakedness of a soul in prayer. You will be helped by the fact that humans themselves do not desire it as much as they suppose. There is such a thing as getting more than they bargained for. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape. Letter 5. My dear Wormwood, it is a little bit disappointing to expect a detailed report on your work and receive instead such a vague rhapsody as your last letter. You say you are delirious with joy because the European humans have started another of their wars. I see very well what has happened to you. You are not delirious, you are only drunk. Reading between the lines in your very unbalanced account of this patient's sleep last night, I can reconstruct your state of mind fairly accurately. For the first time in your career, you have tasted that wine which is the reward of all our labors, the anguish and the bewilderment of a human soul. It has gone to your head. I can hardly blame you. I do not expect old heads of young shoulders. Did the patient respond to some of your terror pictures of the future? Did you work in some good self-pitying glance at the happy past? Some fine thrills in the pit of the stomach where there you played your violin prettily, did you? Well, it's all very natural. But do remember, Wormwood, that duty comes before pleasure. If any present self-indulgence on your part leads to the ultimate loss of the prey, you will be left eternally thirsty. For that drought of which you are now so much enjoying your first sip, if on the other hand, by steady and cool-headed application here and now you can finally secure his soul, he will then be yours forever, a brim-full living chalice of despair and horrors and astonishment, which you can raise to your lips as often as you please. So do not allow any temporary excitement to distract you from the real business and undermining faith and preventing the formation of virtues. Give me without fail in your next letter a full account of the patient's reaction to the war so that we can consider whether you are likely to do more good by making him an extreme patriot or an ardent pacifist. There are all sorts of possibilities. In the meantime, I warn you not to hope too much from a war. Of course, a war is entertaining. The immediate fear and suffering of humans is a legitimate and pleasing refreshment for our myriads of toiling workers. But what permanent good does it do us unless we make use of it for bringing souls to our Father below? When I see the temporal suffering of humans who finally escape us, I feel as if I had been allowed to taste the first course of rich banquet and then denied the rest. It is worse than not to have tasted it at all. The enemy, true of his barbarous methods of warfare, allows us to see the short misery of his favorites only to tantalize and torment us, to mock the incessant hunger which during this present phase of the great afflict, his blockade is admittedly imposing. Let us therefore think rather how to use than how to enjoy this European war, for it has certain tendencies inherent in it which are in themselves by no means in our favor. We may hope for a good deal of cruelty and unchastity, but if we are not careful, we shall see thousands turning in this tribulation to the enemy, while 10,000s who do not go so far as that will nevertheless have their attention diverted from themselves and to values and cause which they believed to be higher than the self. I know that the enemy disapproves many of these causes, but that is where he is unfair. He often makes prizes of humans who have given their lives for causes he thinks bad on the monstrously sophistical ground that the humans thought them good and were following the best they knew. Consider too what undesirable death occurs in wartime. Men are killed in places where they knew they might be killed and to which they go. If they are at all of the enemy's party, prepare how much better for us if all humans died in costly nursing homes and amid doctors who lie, nurses who lie, friends who lie, as we have trained them, promising life, to dying, encouraging the belief that sickness excuses every indulgence, and even if our workers know their job, withholding all suggestions of a priest, lest it should betray to the sick man his true condition. And how disastrous for us is the continual remembrance of death which war enforces. One of our best weapons, contended worldliness, is rendered useless. In wartime, not even a human can believe that he is going to live forever. I know that Screwtape and others have seen in wars a great opportunity for attacks on faith, but I think that view is exaggerated. The enemy's humans, partisans, have all been plainly told by him that suffering is an essential part of what he calls redemption, so that a faith which is destroyed by a war or a pestilence cannot really have been worth the trouble of destroying. I am speaking now of diffused suffering over a long period, such as the war will produce. Of course, at the precise moment of terror, bereavement, or physical pain, you may catch your man when his reasons is temporarily suspended. But even then, if he applies to the enemy headquarters, I have found that the post is nearly always defended. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape. business is to keep them thinking about what will happen to them. Your patient will, of course, have picked up a notion that he must submit with patience to the enemy's will. What the enemy means by which is primarily that he should accept with patience in the tribulation which has actually been dealt out to him. The present anxiety and suspense, it is about this, that he is to say, thy will be done, and for the daily task of bearing this, that the daily bread will be provided. It is your business to see that the patient never thinks of the present fear as his appointed cross, but only of the things he is afraid of. Let him regard them as his crosses. Let him forget that, since they are incompatible, that they cannot all happen to him, and let him try to practice fortitude and patience to them, all in advance for real resignation at the same moment to a dozen different and hypothetical fates. It is almost impossible, and the enemy does not really assist to those who are trying to attain it. Resignation to the present and actual suffering, even where the suffering consists of fear. It is easier and is actually helped by this direct action. It is important spiritual law. It is here involved. I have explained that you can weaken his prayers by diverting his attention from the enemy himself to his own states of mind about the enemy. On the other hand, fear becomes easier to master when the patient's mind is diverted from the thing feared to the fear itself, considered as a present and undesirable state of his own mind. And when he regards the fear as his appointed cross, he will inevitably think of it as a state of mind. One can therefore formulate the general rule in all activities of mind which favor our cause. Encourage the patient to be self-conscious and to concentrate on objects, but in all activities favorable to the enemy, bent his book back on itself. Let an insult or a woman's body so fix his attention outward that he does not reflect. I am now entering into the state called anger, or the state called lust. Contrariwise, let the reflection, my feelings are now growing more devout or more charitable. So fix his attention inward, that he no longer looks beyond himself to see our enemy or his own neighbors. As regards his more general attitude to the war, you must not rely too much on those feelings of hatred which the humans are so fond of discussing in Christian or anti-Christian periodicals. In his anguish, the patient can, of course, be encouraged to revenge himself by some vindictive feeling directed towards the German leaders, and that is good so far as it goes, but it is usually sort of melodramatic or mythical hatred directed against imaginary scapegoats. He has never met these people in real life. They are lay figures modeled on what he gets from newspapers. The results of such fanciful hatred are often most disappointing, and of all humans, the English are in this respect the most deplorable milksops. They are creatures of that miserable sort of who loudly proclaim that torture is too good for their enemies, and then give tea and cigarettes to the first wounded German pilot who turns up at the back door. Do what you will, there is going to be some benevolence as well as some malice in your patient's soul. The great thing is to direct the malice to his immediate neighbors, whom he meets every day, and to thrust his benevolence benevolence out to the remote circumference, to people he does not know. The malice thus become wholly real, and the benevolence largely imaginary. There is no good at all in inflaming his hatred of Germans if, at the same time, a pernicious habit of charity is growing up between him and his mother, his employer, and the man he meets in the train. Think of your man as a series of concentric circles, his will being the innermost, his intellect coming next, and finally his fantasy. You can hardly hope at once to exclude from all the circles everything that smells of the enemy, but you must keep on shoving all the virtues outward till they are finally located in their circle of fantasy, and all the desirable qualities inward into the will. It is only in so far as they reach the will and are the embodied in habits that the virtues are really fatal to us. I don't, of course, mean what the patient mistakes for his will, the conscious fume and fret of resolutions and clenched teeth, but the real center, what the enemy calls the heart, all sorts of virtues painted in the fantasy or approved by the intellect, or even in some measure loved and admired, will not keep a man from our Father's house. Indeed, they make him more amusing when he gets there. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape. I'm gonna go ahead and read letter 7. My dear Wormwood, I wonder you should ask me whether it is essential to the keep of the patient in ignorance of your own existence. That question, at least for the present phase of the struggle, has been answered for us by the High Command. Our policy for the moment is to conceal ourselves. Of course, this has not always been so. We are really faced with a cruel dilemma. When the humans disbelieve in our existence, we lose all the pleasing results of direct terrorism, and we make no magicians. On the other hand, when they believe in us, we cannot make them materialists and skeptics. At least not yet. I have great hopes that we shall learn in due time how to emotionalize and mythologize their science to such an extent that what it is, in effect, a belief in us, though not under that name, will creep in while the human mind remains closed to believe in the enemy, the life force, the worship of sex, and some aspects of psychoanalysis may here prove useful if once we can produce our perfect work. The materialist magician, the man not using but veritably worshipping what he vaguely calls forces, while denying the existence of the spirits. Then the end of the war, we will be in sight. But in the meantime, we must obey our orders. I do not think that we'll have much difficulty in keeping the patient in the dark. The fact that devils are predominantly comic figures in the modern imagination will help you. If any faint suspicion of your existence begins to arise in his mind, suggest it to him a picture of something in red tights, and persuade him that since he cannot believe in that, it is an old textbook method of confusing them, he therefore cannot believe in you. I had not forgotten my promise to consider whether we should make the patient an extreme patriot or an extreme pacifist. All extremes except extreme devotion to the enemy always, of course, but at this period, some ages are lukewarm and complacent, and then it is our business to soothe them yet faster asleep. Other ages, of which the present is one, are unbalanced and prone to faction. It is our business to inflame them. Any small coterie bound together by some interest which other men dislike or ignore tends to develop inside itself a hothouse mutual admiration, and towards the outer world a great deal of pride and hatred, which is entertained without shame because of the cause it is a sponsor, and it is a thought to be impersonal, even when the little group exists originally for the enemy's own purposes. This remains true. We want the church to be small, not only that fewer men may know the enemy, but also that those who do may acquire the uneasy intensity and the defensive self-righteous of a secret society or clique. The church herself is, of course, heavenly defended, and we have never yet quite succeeded in giving her all the characteristics of the faction, but subordinate factions within her have often produced admirable results, from the parties of Paul and of Apollos at Corinth down the high and the low parties of the Church of England. If your patient can be induced to become a conscientious objector, he will automatically find himself one of a small, vocal, organized, and unpopular society, and the effects of this on one so new to Christianity will almost certainly be good, but only almost certainly, as he had serious doubts about the lawfulness of serving in a just war before his present war began. If he, a man of great physical courage, so great that he will have conscious misgivings about the real motives of his pacifism, can he, when nearest to honesty, no humans is ever very near, feel fully convinced that he is actuated wholly by the desire to obey the enemy? If he is that sort of man, his pacifism will probably not do us much good, and the enemy will probably protect him from the usual consequences of belonging to a sect. Your best plan is that case would be to attempt a sudden, confused, emotional crisis from which he might emerge as an uneasy convert to patriotism. Such things can often be managed, but if he is the man I take him to be, try pacifism. Whichever he adopts, your main task will be the same. Let him begin to treating the patriotism or the pacifism as a part of his religion. Then let him, under the influence of the partisan spirit, come to regard it as a most important part. Then quietly and gradually nurse him to the stage at which the religion becomes merely part of the cause, in which Christianity is valued chiefly because of the excellent arguments it can produce in favors of the British war effort, or the pacifism, the attitude which you want to guard against. It is that in which temporal affairs are treated primarily as material for obedience. Once you have made the world an end and faith a means, you have almost won your man, and it makes very little difference what kind of worldly end he is pursuing, provided that meetings, pamphlets, policies, movements, causes, and crusades matter more to him than prayers and sacrament and charity. He is ours. And the more religious on those terms, the more securely ours. I could show you a pretty cage full down here. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape. Thank you guys so much for watching.